Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about meditation, and I want to really give you the tools to be able to succeed and build a really long-lasting meditation practice. This is perhaps the longest script I have ever written for a video. This is something I am very, very passionate about, that I have a lot of personal experience with. So we're going to briefly be talking about what meditation is, and then we're going to go into the goals of meditation. What is the point of meditation, and what is it that we are trying to achieve? Then we're going to talk about many different types of meditation. I'm also going to have a section dedicated to how to start a meditation practice and also how to stay consistent. And then I have an entire section dedicated just to neurodivergent minds. So we're going to talk about ADHD, we're going to talk about Aphantasia, which is people that cannot visualize. We're going to also talk about ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And after that, I have a chapter in this video where I have taken your questions from some of my other videos regarding meditation, and I'm going to be answering them in that section. So it's going to be a little bit like a answers and questions section. The sun is like deciding to join us for today's conversation, but there is a prerequisite for this video. I previously made an occultist guide to brainwave states, so I'm going to link that down below in the description box, and if you have not seen that video yet, I highly recommend that you watch it. I talk about brainwave states all the way from gamma to delta, and I also talk about why it's important, specifically for occultists, for witches or spiritualists of any kind, why it's so important for us to be able to switch between altered states of consciousness at will. In that video, I also talked about the reality threshold. I talked about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind. So a lot of that stuff in that video is very foundational to what we're going to be talking about today, and I may use terminology from that video. So again, if you haven't watched it, stop this video, go check out that other video, and then come back. Let's first establish what is meditation. Historically, meditation comes from the East, and it is a practice that has been done for thousands and thousands of years. Because this video is already going to be so long, teaching someone how to develop a really strong meditative practice, I'm not going to go into the history of meditation here, but I did want to put a clause at the very beginning of this video. I think it's so important for you to take some time to go research where meditation actually came from, because a lot of cultural context was lost when it migrated from the East to the West. But meditation nowadays is kind of like a giant umbrella term. It basically refers to a wide variety of practices that integrates the mind and the body. It is sometimes used to calm the mind or enhance your overall being. And as you will see in this video, there are so many different types of meditation that we are going to explore. A question I often get a lot is, what is the goal of meditation, or what's the purpose? Why are we doing this in the first place? And I want to talk about it from a broader perspective, why we meditate, and then I also want to kind of hone in specifically for occultists, witches, and any other spiritual beings, why specifically we should meditate, and those reasons differ slightly from just general public knowledge. So depending on the culture, depending on the person, you're going to get very different answers as to why it's important to meditate and what the overall purpose is. For me personally, yes, meditation has a lot of health benefits for your body, for your mind, for your spirit, but for me, meditation isn't necessarily about getting stuff. It's not something I do in order to get something out of it. That's not really the approach that I take to meditation. The goal of meditation for me is to meditate. There is no goal beyond that. My goal for meditation is to meditate. It is to be, it is to exist, it is to become a silent observer. And this is so, so important for one's spiritual journey. I talked about this a lot I have a video that was about spiritual awakenings and how to kind of navigate that. And I discussed the ego and the higher self a lot in that video. So if you're interested more on this conversation in particular, I'll link that video down below in the description box. But you essentially want to become a silent observer of your own mind. When you meditate, you are developing a sense of self-awareness, you are becoming familiar with your thought patterns, and you are also slightly detaching yourself from your ego. Because when you are sitting there in silence, let's say you're doing a more traditional form of meditation, and you have some thoughts roll into your head while you're meditating, you can detach yourself a little bit and say, okay, those thoughts aren't me. I can just let those thoughts thoughts pass on by. Thoughts can come and go, and that is just fine, but you are creating this level of detachment and becoming a silent observer of the own inner mechanisms of your mind. So this alone is so important for someone's spiritual journey. If you are about to go through a spiritual awakening, or if you are navigating that spiritual awakening right now, or even just continuing on after you've had that awakening years later, it's such an excellent practice of mindfulness and just getting to know your ego a little bit more and being able to create that separation. This is important for witches and occultists specifically because when you are able to identify what your own mind is and your own mechanisms, it's easier to figure out when there is some sort of divine intervention, when some sort of thought enters your mind that is not your own, or some sort of prophetic vision that you may have. It's easier to identify what is you and what is something else, maybe some sort of higher power that you believe in, maybe some sort of spirit or other spiritual entity that you're working with. So it's good to get to know your own mind, of course. And then there are also many health benefits. I'm not going to list them all here. You can feel free to look them up if you want. Meditation is so good for your physical health. It is great for concentration and focus. And the more you meditate and the more consistent you are with your meditation practice, the easier it becomes to switch in between those altered states of consciousness. And we already talked about that in the brainwave states video, why that's so important to be able to bypass your reality threshold, especially when you're doing occult rituals. What's also interesting is that there have been many studies finding that there is a piece in your brain called the corpus callosum, and when people meditate for longer lengths and a very consistent amount of time, the corpus callosum in your brain actually grows in size, which is incredible. The fact that meditation grows this corpus callosum, it's like taking your brain and putting it through a workout, and it's actually getting beefier and building muscles, if you can visualize it that way. Don't take that literally. Hopefully you understand what I mean. And so the corpus callosum is this thick band that connects the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere together. It facilitates communication between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. This is something I talked about in my psychic abilities video. A lot of people, after establishing a regular practice of meditation, see a massive increase not only in cognitive performance, but also in them being able to tap into their intuition, improving their psychic abilities, which is also very important for the occultist when you're doing these occult rituals. Overall, meditation really increases your ability to work with the intangible, and that is so important. Let's talk about the various types of meditation. I am not going to demonstrate all of these different types of meditations in this video, and in fact, there's so many different types of meditation now that it would be nearly impossible for me to sit here and list them all off, but I will give you a couple so you can further your research on these topics, maybe find the one that resonates with you that you want to look into a little bit further. First type of meditation is where we think of someone sitting down, spine straight, with their legs crossed, their eyes are closed, maybe they're holding their hands in some sort of position. These are called mudras, and we definitely don't have the time to get into that in this video, but each finger can link you to a different point. We will talk about meditative triggers though later in this video. But we often visualize someone sitting down, cross-legged, spine straight, and they are in a completely silent space, and they are just becoming the observer of their own thoughts. They are not thinking about anything actively. Maybe they're counting their breaths, you know, they're breathing in and exhaling slowly, counting to 10, then starting over and counting to 10 again. Unless you are going through a very specific tradition, unless you are trying to become a Buddhist monk or some other spiritual tradition that requires you to have a certain level of discipline, this type of meditation is not necessary for everyone. And what I want to really express and drive home in this video is that everyone's brains are wired a little bit differently. So it's so important for you to be able to figure out the techniques that work for you in your magical practice, because that's not necessarily going to be the same as someone else. There are some people that cannot sit down with their spine straight and just try to become a silent observer of their thoughts. That just may not work for them. So apart from that more traditional style of meditation, what else can we do? I want to first talk about visualization. That is a term that you will often hear when people are sitting down or laying down for their meditations and they are actively visualizing something. They are putting pictures or images in their head that follow some sort of storyline. There's either guided visualizations where someone is taking you on a journey through the forest or through through a beach or wherever it is. They're taking you on this visual story. You have your eyes closed and you are imagining these visuals as they walk you through this journey. And then there are unguided visualizations, which can enter the realm of spirit flight and astral work, which is so fun and exciting. And this is what I personally utilize the most. Depending on the style of visualization, sometimes they're called shamanic journeys. If there's a shamanic element to it, you have some drumming and a specific way of entering the astral realm. And if you end up visualizing going to an upper world or a lower world, that's usually what people refer to when they say more like a shamanic journey. There's a lot more that goes into shamanic journeys, but this video is not about that. I find that visualizations in particular are really good for people that struggle with ADHD because it gives your mind something to think about. It gives your mind something to do. And so if you're brand new to visualizations, I definitely recommend doing perhaps a few guided ones before you try to do one on your own. This will just give you a better idea of how to meditate in general when you have someone guiding you where to go, especially if you start doing visualizations where you're going on a journey. You really want to come back the same way that you went in, if that makes sense. Bente the North Switch and I did a really long collaboration together where we talked about spirit flight and astral work and talked about visualizing in general. And so if this is something that you're interested in, I'm going to have so many links down below for you in the description box. I want to make sure you have so many sources by the end of this video. But that video goes a lot more in depth in astral work in general. Another type of meditation would be repetitive and monotonous tasks. I know this one is very controversial and there are some people that would not consider this true meditation, but these types of activities do help you enter an alpha brainwave state, which, as we talked about in that brainwave state video, is really where you want to be for a lot of these occult rituals. And it really does help cultivate a sense of mindfulness. So this includes any sort of repetitive task where you can do this on autopilot. You don't really have to think about it too much. And it kind of lulls you into this trance-like state where you're not really consciously thinking about anything anymore and you're really just in this creative flow. So if you're doing something redundant, maybe you're at work even, and you have to spend a whole hour just sitting there folding envelopes, or I don't know, doing something equally as redundant, rather than putting on a TV show or a podcast or some sort of music to distract you, take that moment to be really mindful and present and use that as your meditation for the day and allow yourself to go into a trance-like state as you're simply sitting there folding pieces of paper or whatever it happens to be. But the idea here is to find tasks that are so repetitive and redundant that you don't have to consciously think. You can use that as an opportunity to be meditative. Just something that is so repetitive and lulling where you feel yourself falling into a more trance-like state, and you can become more mindful with where you are and what it is that you're doing and just really be present in that moment. And I want to talk about mindfulness here because I think people use the terms meditation and mindfulness synonymously, and they're not necessarily the same thing, although they do have some crossover. I would consider mindfulness a type of meditation, but not all meditation is mindfulness, if that makes sense. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about this, and the opinions are really going to vary greatly. But mindfulness is all about being very, very present and aware in the moment. So the example that I like to use for this is if you're sitting down eating your dinner or your lunch for the day, rather than turning on the TV to watch something while you eat, you can take that moment to be very meditative and go into this mindful space where you are really tasting every morsel on your plate. You are slowly putting the food in your mouth, slowly chewing, letting it be a full sensory experience of taste and sight and smell. So if you struggle with more traditional forms of meditation, then I would definitely start with mindfulness and just becoming really present with what it is that you're actually doing. Wow, the sun is really making my lighting terrible today. We're just gonna go with it because it's what the universe wants today. But if you're that person that has sat down to try to do a traditional meditation and you have just found that you can't do it, it feels incredibly uncomfortable to be a silent observer of your thoughts, then I would start with some of these mindfulness practices and build up to something like that later down the line. Another type of meditation is a body scan or a progressive relaxation technique of some sorts. You can type it into YouTube and there are tons of different guided body scans that'll come up for you to try, but it is a progressive relaxation technique where you start with your feet or your head, either one, and then you slowly begin relaxing each point of your body as you work either down or up your body. And this is really, really great for beginners. I almost always recommend body scans as one of the very first meditations that someone should ever do. Okay, that is much better. Tried to fix the curtains a little bit. Not only are body scans just a really pleasant, wonderful thing to experience, they help you get in touch with your physiological body. You would be surprised how detached a lot of us are from our own bodies. We think we might know what's going on in our bodies until we sit down to do a body scan meditation, and then we realize, oh, I am holding tension in my left calf. I am holding tension in my low back. I had no idea how much tension was actually in those points. And so it really helps integrate your mind and your body together a lot better. So if you are a beginner watching this video, please look up body scan meditations. I think it's such a great place to start. And then of course there is breath work. So there are specific forms of meditation where you have like box breathing, you have count to 10 breaths and start again. There's so many different types of breath work. So a very, very basic breath work exercise would be to inhale slowly to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 4, and hold to the count of 4. So what you would do is inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold your breath for 4 counts, and exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 4 counts. You could also just slowly take some deep breaths, and upon the exhale of each deep breath, you would count 1, and then you inhale again, exhale 2, inhale again, exhale 3, and you would count all the way up to 10, and once you hit 10, you go back to 1 and you start all over again. So again, it gives your brain actually something to do in meditation rather than just sitting there trying to think of nothing, which by the way, we're going to talk about that in a second. The goal is not to actually think about nothing. We'll talk about that in a moment. But working with your breath is such a powerful tool to again integrate the mind and the body. So I definitely encourage beginners to also look into various breathwork techniques. Another broad category of meditation is called mantra meditation, and this is basically where you have a sound, a mantra, or you can have a word or a phrase that you are repeating over and over again, either silently to yourself or out loud. And the goal here is to really focus the mind and evoke very specific qualities of the state of consciousness that you're hoping to achieve. So a type of mantra meditation is called transcendental meditation. This is usually abbreviated to TM if you ever see that, but this is a very specific type of mantra meditation where you are typically given a personalized mantra by a trained teacher. So you would have to work with somebody who specializes in TM, but this technique is so effective for getting you into those really deep theta brainwave states. Mantra meditations in general, in my experience, they go a little bit beyond things like body scans and breath work. And not to say that those types of meditations can't get you in a really deep, delicious theta brainwave state, but I have personally found that mantra meditations really helps me to transcend, to get to that next level of consciousness, deep down into that theta brainwave state. So if you've already done body scans before, you've already done breath work, or maybe a more traditional style of meditation where you are sitting quietly observing your thoughts and you just feel like you can't push past the alpha brainwave state, I would suggest maybe looking into some sort of mantra meditation to help you get a little bit deeper. There are still so many other types of meditation, such as Kundalini meditation, which I actually personally would consider this not really a meditation for beginners. I would say this is more of like a intermediate experience, just in my own personal opinion, of course. But Kundalini meditations really are to awaken some sort of spiritual energy or dormant energy, Kundalini, that is supposedly residing in the base of the spine. And so with this, there is breath work, there is chanting, there is movement. This is a whole really fascinating type of meditation on its own, because there are a lot of people that say they have Kundalini experiences with these types of meditations that potentially bring them all the way up to a gamma brainwave state. This is kind of what I mentioned in that first video, which is an incredibly heightened place of focus. Your brain is moving very, very quickly. So it's really interesting to think about, because meditation, we're usually descending down and going into an alpha or a theta brainwave state. But there are some meditations like this Kundalini meditation where it's been seen that people go all the way up to gamma and have these incredibly enlightening experiences. And then of course there are other styles of movement meditation, but along with drumming and dancing, you have things like Qigong, which a lot of people would consider a form of mindfulness and moving meditation. So as you can see, there are so many different types of meditation available for you to be able to create the practice that works best for you. One size does not fit all. You do not have to do a more traditional style of meditation if that doesn't fit you. Now that we have talked about the many different types of meditation, let's talk about how to start a meditation practice and some of the tips that I think that you should know in order to begin. The first thing that I want to address is there is this misconception where people think when they sit down to meditate that they have to shut every thought out of their mind and not think of anything at all. And this is not necessarily the case. There are some very specific traditions with meditation where you are developing a certain level of discipline. And so yes, you are trying to not really think of anything. But with meditation, in my experience, you are more becoming that silent observer, as we talked about in the beginning of this video. Rather than thinking about it as, I can't allow any thoughts to enter my mind, I have to shut all of my thoughts out and I have to quiet my mind, allow the thoughts to roll in. Allow the thoughts, whatever it is, whatever pops into your head while you're meditating, that is okay. Also allow those thoughts to pass on by. They do not need to stay. They are not a part of you. You can release them and let them go. So it's not about totally clearing your mind. It's about observing the thoughts that are coming in your head and then letting them go and pass by. And once you approach meditation this way, it becomes a lot less daunting because you realize, oh, I don't have to sit here and try to clear my mind. I can just allow the thoughts to roll in and let them go and resume back to my breathing, my breath work, my visualization, whatever it is that you're doing in that moment for your meditation. And if you do find that there are constant thoughts just coming in your head over and over, even after meditating, if it makes you feel better, even myself, after meditating for many, many years, there are some days where I sit down and the meditation was just not good, in my opinion. I sit down and I'm frustrated with myself because I can't stop thinking about the million things that are going on in my life. I have so much to do. I don't have time to sit down and be doing this meditation right now. But that in itself is not an unsuccessful meditation, because the goal of meditation is not to clear your mind. It's just to become a silent observer. So even on those days where I feel like I did a bad job meditating because I had all these thoughts rolling in my head, I have to check myself and say, wait a minute, I didn't do a bad job. The goal of meditation is not to clear my mind. I did become a silent observer. I let those thoughts roll in and then I let them pass by. So to just start your meditative practice, I want to take some of the pressure off of you, because I know a lot of people have that misconception where they think they just have to think of nothing at all. And as we talked about previously, you have to really create the meditative practice that works for you specifically, because our brains are wired differently. So let's talk about the position that you should be in when you're meditating. No, you do not have to be sitting with your spine upright, legs crossed, etc. Again, very specific traditions do that to develop discipline, and that is also a very valid meditative practice. But if you are not a part of those traditions, it is not necessary for you to do that. You can lay down in bed if you need to. I personally have a back injury. I can't sit with my spine straight. It just doesn't work for me. It's incredibly painful. So for me, I lay down for a lot of my meditations. With the caveat though, I will say that if you lay down for your meditations, it is really easy to fall asleep. So you do want to make sure whatever position you're in, you want to make sure that you are awake and that you are not going to fall asleep. Maybe make it not too comfortable, if you know what I mean. Don't curl up in bed with the covers all up around you. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it does make it a lot harder to not fall asleep in those positions. So pick whatever position feels comfortable for you, but try not to make it so comfortable to where you're just gonna fall asleep. So that is why a lot of people opt for sitting positions who don't have back injuries and can actually sit without incredible pain. By the way, I realize I'm sitting right now. I have a very special chair that I'm sitting on, but I would not be able to sit here for an hour to do an hour-long meditation. No, that just would not work for me. So the next thing I suggest is setting the mood. It really is a lot easier to meditate when you have the lights dim. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be pitch black, but maybe turn off the lights and light a couple candles, or if you have a dimmer light, just dim it down so you're not in harsh light. This also helps because when you go in such a deep trance, when you're coming back out of that trance, you want it to be a really, almost like a cocoon of warmth. When you're returning back to your senses and returning back to your body, you're not startled by this incredibly harsh light. So I would focus on the ambiance of your space, make it as easy as possible to not only get into meditation, but also for when you're coming back out of meditation. And we're going to talk about safe landings later in this video to address a question that comes up towards the end. Some people like to burn some aromatic herbs. Some people like to light some incense. I think it's really good good to incorporate some psychological triggers here, so you can actually take some classical conditioning and use that to your advantage. So pick an herb, a scent, an incense, whatever it is that you only use during meditation. This is my tip for you to not only stay consistent, but to develop triggers and feedback loops in your brain, and to kind of condition yourself to be able to meditate on command. So you would use this, let's say, incense every time that you meditate, and that smell invokes this feeling of going into an altered state of consciousness. A lot of people like to use mugwort tea, where they will drink mugwort right before their session. I think valerian root is also a really fun one to use, although it does make you kind of sleepy, so you have to be careful not to do it. Maybe don't do it in the evening or you might fall asleep. But valerian root is really great for sedating the mind and really having some incredible visualizations. So, you know, set the stage, have a little tea beforehand. Maybe you sit down to drink a tea and be a lot more mindful while you're drinking that tea. I would highly suggest something that is not caffeinated, of course. Then you light your incense that you only use during times when you meditate. You dim the lights, light some candles, and there you go. Another tip that I have for you is to allow background noises to be part of your meditation. So I get this question a lot from people: how do I meditate when my household is noisy? I've got kids, or I've got a husband that's doing something downstairs, or whatever it may be. We aren't always in a place that's fully quiet with no external noises. If you live in the city, there may be cars driving by outside, and so all of those noises can be really frustrating when you're trying to meditate and you're trying to focus. So my tip for you is to allow these external noises to be part of the meditative experience. So what I typically do when I've set the scene, I'm sitting down to finally do my meditation, I'm closing my eyes, I'm taking a moment to listen to every possible thing that is occurring in my external environment. So I take a moment to listen to the cars outside and say, that is okay, I am allowing that to be part of my meditative experience. I'm taking a moment to listen to my partner rattling in the kitchen downstairs and allowing that to be part of my meditative experience. Same with children playing, same with dogs or other animals, it doesn't matter. Take a moment to focus on all of those external sounds and say that it's okay that those sounds are part of this meditation. And this also helps trick your brain a little bit too, because when you're in the deep meditation, you are less likely to be startled by some sort of external sound, because you have told yourself that they are part of the meditation. So if your kids start to fight downstairs or something, you're less likely to be brought out of your meditative experience because you've already focused on those sounds and it's part of the experience. Another tip that I have for you is to program some sort of meditation trigger. So have some sort of position with your hands or position of your body to be in, and have it be the same position for every single meditation you do. So there's a position that I lay in with my hands a certain way, and that is the way I like to meditate. And this is good for a couple of reasons. Again, we're not going to go into mudras in this video, which is where different fingers can connect you to different things, but you can have your hands and your body in certain positions every time you meditate to create some sort of trigger. And then in the future, when you sit down to meditate and you assume that position, once the trigger has built up over many meditations of you sitting in the same position, when you get into that position, your body already knows what to do. It makes the process so much faster, so much more efficient, so you don't have to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes trying to get yourself to relax each time. You can get yourself into this position, and if the trigger works, it will get you to that place of relaxation and an altered state of consciousness so much faster. So one of the questions I had gotten under that other video for brainwave states was, I'm stuck in alpha, or it takes me about 30 minutes to get into an alpha brainwave state. Is there a faster way to do this? And yes, that is where you program some sort of meditative trigger so that each time you sit down to meditate, you can get into that trance-like state so much faster. So if you need to go into your room and sit down and pull some tarot cards, but you don't have time to do a 30-minute meditation in order to get into an alpha brainwave state, you can assume that position, meditate for maybe 5 minutes, and then proceed to pull your tarot cards. So meditation triggers, they are very, very handy. Get it? Handy. Okay, that was lame. And then my last tip for you in this section of how to start is to pick the appropriate time in your schedule because you want to pick a time where you can actually be consistent. There was a long period of time where I tried to meditate at night right before bed, and every single time I would just fall asleep. And that was great, right? Because I mean, it helps with my sleep problems and I was able to fall asleep, but it wasn't great in the fact that I wasn't being able to meditate and actually enjoy the experience of that and maybe go on a visualization meditation or an astral journey or whatever, because I was just passing out afterwards. So for me, I had to switch my schedule a little bit and start doing meditations in the morning after I wake up. So if you are somebody that tends to fall asleep in your meditations, maybe switch it from a nighttime routine to a daytime routine. So I'll usually get up, I'll go and shower, and then I'll lay back down in bed to meditate. And that shower has already woken me up, and I've already rested for the night beforehand, so I'm unlikely to immediately fall back asleep. Whereas if I were just to wake up in the morning and then immediately go into a meditation, I'd probably still fall back asleep because I'm still sleepy. But the act of getting up, getting in the shower, having the water hit my body and cleansing myself, etc., it wakes you up so much more. That way I get back into my meditation and I'm able to actually go on the journey that I want to go on. And we'll talk about complicated situations a little bit later in this video as well, because some people say in their schedule that they just don't have time to meditate, and I used to say the exact same thing, and I don't agree, because usually people's expectation is I have to have 20 minutes every day that I have to set aside for just sitting there and thinking of nothing, and that's not true. As I've demonstrated with all the different types of meditation, you can meditate while you're doing redundant tasks. You can meditate while you're walking. You can sit down in silence for 5 minutes or 1 minute. It does not have to be a long 30-minute to an hour-long meditation every single day. You just have to find the type of meditation that works for you within your schedule, within the restrictions of whatever your daily responsibilities are. So I do think meditation is possible for every single individual. No matter what your schedule is, you will make time for the things that are important to you. Usually what I hear from people when they say, I can't meditate because I don't have the time, maybe the expectations of meditation are not quite right and they just need a different type of meditation to work with. But also I really truly believe that you do make time for the things that are important to you. What I hear when people say they don't have time to meditate is that they don't want to make the time to meditate. And I'm not saying everybody, there are some people that are incredibly busy from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. If so, hopefully there's some things that you can cut out of your life, because I cannot imagine being that busy to where you are constantly on the go doing stuff from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. That sounds terrible. But I don't doubt that there are some people out there that have schedules like that, that have to be like that. And then there are other people that are simply just not wanting to make the time for meditation because they don't want to, or in my case, I was lazy. There was a period of my life where I said to myself, I don't have time to meditate because I'm so tired, I'm so whatever. And it was really just me being lazy. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. And there was a resistance to me wanting to meditate because I didn't want to have to do one more thing, you know? Like I was so tired and exhausted from all these things that I had to do in my daily life. I did not want to add one more chore to do because I was burnt out, until I changed my perspective on what meditation actually is and all the different ways that you can do meditation. And then it doesn't have to be a boring 20 minutes of me sitting down trying to think of nothing. I'm really trying to drive this home to you guys. I hope you've gotten the point right now that there's so many different ways to customize this practice. Let's talk about neurodivergent minds. So I want to talk about ADHD, Aphantasia, and ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder. And I want to give lots of tips and tricks for these three categories, mainly because these are the three that I get questioned about all the time. And I know there are such large populations in each of these categories that could really potentially benefit from some of this information. So I wanted to make sure that I had this timestamp specifically for these three things. So let's talk about ADHD first. This is something that I am very familiar with. Yes, you can absolutely meditate with ADHD. Again, it's going to be different for every person. Some people have mild ADHD. Some people are considered more severe ADHD cases. It really just depends on you. So again, customize, try to figure out what works best for you. There are some people with ADHD that have said that with enough persistence, they were actually able to do more traditional styles of meditation, and that it really just took dedication, time, and practice. For other people with ADHD, they say that no matter what they do, they cannot sit down to meditate, period. And that's just how it is for them. So I want to first ease your mind by saying that it's different for everybody. You also don't have to do sit down meditations. As we've already discussed, and I've mentioned many other times in this video, there are so many other types of meditations that you could do. So I would suggest doing something that gives your brain something to focus on or something to do. Like I had mentioned with visualizations, visualizations can be really helpful because it gives your brain something to think about as you're going on this journey, walking through a a forest, working with different animals, spirits, going to a beach, whatever it is, doing these guided visualizations where you're imagining something and you're kind of following a storyline can be really helpful. Some people can't even do that. Some people cannot even do a visualization, in which case I would suggest doing some sort of moving meditation. So this would be something like a nature walk, dancing or drumming, getting into Qigong, you know, things like that. There is something that someone had commented also that I wanted to include here. So Rye Guy 56, thank you for your comment. I want to give credit where credit is due, but he had mentioned that he has ADHD and it is absolutely possible to meditate and to be successful. And this person's advice was to really glaze over your eyes, you know, kind of defocus your eyes on what you're looking at. You could either stare into a flame or light some incense and then stare into the smoke and watch the smoke swirl around, so it gives you something to do. So try to defocus your eyes, stare into a flame, stare into some smoke, and see if that helps. Let's talk about aphantasia. So this is a condition where people cannot visualize whatsoever. And there is an image that I will put up on the screen of an apple, and it really just kind of depends where you are in your abilities to visualize what my advice is going to be for this. So as you will see in the image, you have one person at number 1 that is very clearly able to see an apple in 3D, in full color. Maybe they can even experience it with smell and taste. And then you have the other person all the way over at a 5 that can't visualize anything at all. Aphantasia supposedly affects around 2 to 3% of the population, although I don't know how accurate that number is because some people just don't know if they have it or not, or haven't even thought about it before. There are some people that say they have aphantasia and they are able to visualize with enough practice, dedication, time, etc. And then there are other people with aphantasia that say no matter what they try, they are not able to visualize. So you're gonna have to figure out, are you a 5? Are you a 4 or 3? And maybe you can boost yourself up to a 2 or maybe even a 1 with enough practice. Again, it's going to be different for everybody, right? The first thing that I want to say to people that have aphantasia is you don't have to visualize if you don't want to. As I've expressed many times in this video, there are so many other meditations available for you. You don't have to do that. You can do a more mantra style meditation where you have a sound or a specific word or a phrase that you are repeating over and over and over again to get yourself into an altered state of consciousness, in which case visualization is not necessary at all. You don't have to use it for that. You can do breath work. You can even do body scans without any sort of ability to visualize, because what you're doing during those body scans is you're bringing your attention to certain parts of your body and relaxing the muscles in the area. There's nothing really to visualize in some of those body scans. I know there is a heavy emphasis in occult rituals and witchcraft rituals to visualize, but there are always adaptations. You can always make physical correspondences or physical representations in front of you on your altar space rather than doing those visualizing techniques in your head. So if the ritual says that you need to visualize on the color red, instead of visualizing that color, you would literally put something that has the color of red right in front of you on your altar space. Visualization is not necessary, and I just want to take some of the pressure off with that. If you do want to start to visualize though, I would recommend focusing on other senses. So let's go back to the apple analogy. You are trying to visualize an apple in your head. Rather than seeing the apple, try to focus on your other senses with the apple. Can you smell it? Can you touch it? Can you maybe bite the apple and taste it? Are there any other senses that you can bring in other than sight? Some people can't actually see the apple, but they can taste it, or they can smell it, you know? So try to find if any of your other senses are going to allow you to create this world in your head that doesn't involve sight. Another thing that you can do is create a narrative around what it is that you were trying to visualize. So let's say the book tells you to visualize an apple and you can't see an apple. Maybe you create a narrative around the apple instead. So you think of the words red, round, there's a stem sticking out, leaf. Maybe there's a leaf in the stem, and you're creating this narrative in your mind about the apple. Even though you can't really see it, the words are in your mind and you can at least hold on to that. Another thing that I think is really important here is emotion. Emotion is so important, in my opinion, when we're doing occult rituals. When we're sitting down to do a spell or a ritual, we're sitting down to do some divination, being able to connect with your emotions, your intention, your will, your drive, whatever it is that's really powering what you're doing. Connecting to your emotions and what you feel is sometimes even more powerful than visualization, in my opinion. I do think visualization is important for my practice, of course, but the emotion behind it is also important. You can also try going on a guided visualization, and when they say things like, you are entering a forest, if you can't see the forest, try to describe it again in narrative form and say, okay, trees, there's going to be 5 trees to the left, there's a little stream to the right, and I can hear the little trickle of the stream. Maybe you can't see the stream, but you can at least hear it, or get yourself to start creating some sort of story around what it is that they're trying to get you to visualize. So let's move on to ASD now, autism spectrum disorder. I have quite a few people asking me questions that specifically center around sensory issues. So of course my advice here is going to be to pick a place that is as quiet as possible, where you can really control the sensory input around you. That is going to be the most important thing. You might want to consider putting some earplugs on or some headphones and listening to some music that doesn't feel too distracting. And also, as I've mentioned, play around with different sitting positions. If you find that one sitting position is really agitating to you, you want to make sure you have the right textures around you. Definitely feel free to make yourself as comfortable as possible. If you have a place where there is a lot of sensory input and you just simply, you can't find a quiet place to meditate, instead of trying to block out all of the other sensations, try to focus on one sensory input. And what I mean by that is to focus on one sound or one texture, like the texture of your meditation cushion or the texture of your blanket or something. You can even focus on your breath itself, or maybe some sort of calming object that you have in your hand. And this is going to be your focal point for the meditation. So no matter what happens around you with all the different sensory inputs happening, you can focus on this one thing. For people with ASD specifically, I would really recommend trying progressive relaxation techniques, because you may not realize that you have so much tension held in certain parts of your body. You may be tense and just not realize it. So I would recommend looking into body scan meditations, or again, the progressive relaxation techniques where you are relaxing those muscles and letting them go, because I do find that a lot of ASD individuals just have so much tension. Also, any sort of guided meditation can be helpful because it provides you with specific instructions of what you should be doing next. And ultimately, you just want to be really patient and really compassionate with yourself, because you're going to have to figure out what ultimately works best for your own body. Let's talk about how to stay consistent. This is another set of questions that I get all the time. How do you stay consistent with your meditation practice? First of all, I just want to say that I'm not perfect. There are times when I go through lulls and I don't meditate for months, and then I realize to myself, oh my gosh, I haven't meditated in months. That's probably why I feel so stressed out. And then I start meditating again. So just to ease your mind, we're not all perfect. There are going to be times where you probably forget to meditate, and that's okay. But I do have some additional tips for staying consistent as well. So the first thing I want to say is to start out really small. You know, a lot of people, when they first start meditating, they start with a 10 or even a 20-minute meditation, and that is so much longer than you think it is. You would think, oh, 10 to 20 minutes, that's not very long at all, until you're sitting there and you're actually doing a 10 to 20-minute meditation, and you realize this is the longest 10 to 20 minutes I have ever experienced in my life. So I would recommend starting small with a 5-minute meditation or even a 1-minute meditation. You can just gently remind yourself to get back into your meditation practice, and it's okay if you aren't perfectly consistent all the time. So just wanted to say that first. If you are somebody that does have ADHD or has a really hard time focusing, 1-minute meditations might be better to start with. And then after a couple weeks of consistent 1-minute meditations, then work up to 5 minutes. And again, after a couple weeks of 5 minutes, or even doing a month of 5-minute meditations, then move up to 10 minutes and just increase that time gradually. It'll help you stay consistent so much better. I would also encourage you to, here's a little psychology trick, create a little happy, positive feedback loop in your brain. So reward yourself after every meditation. It can be whatever you want it to be, maybe something you really enjoy doing. So you say to yourself, okay, after this 5-minute meditation, I get to do something really fun that I enjoy. Or maybe it's like a piece of chocolate or something. Dark chocolate is actually really good for us. So I like to reward myself with a little piece of dark chocolate after I do a meditation. So create some sort of routine for yourself where you're getting some sort of little treat, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be an edible treat, but something happy and positive that makes you relate meditation to happy, positive, good stuff in your mind, and it makes you want to continue doing it. So another thing that I would suggest is habit stacking. There is a concept in the psychology world called habit stacking, which is where you take existing habits and then you stack other new habits onto them so that you can create a really consistent and strong routine. So let's say you get up every morning to go shower, then you go downstairs and you make yourself a cup of morning tea, whatever it is. And that is your habit. That is part of your morning routine. You could meditate right after drinking that cup of tea and stack that new habit onto your other habits. And so then it's just like a trigger. When you wake up, you shower, you drink tea, you meditate. Maybe you switch your tea from a caffeinated one to a decaffeinated one though, or maybe you try to drink some sort of herbal tea that's good for meditation. Figure out your schedule and figure out what works for you. But basically link your meditation to other activities that you're already doing in your life. Another tip is to change your perspective on meditation. So many people view meditation as a chore, as something they have to do, and it's like, oh, okay, I have to sit down and do this chore now because it's good for me, it has all these health benefits and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to get yourself to do something that you view as a chore when you're already burnt out. So I would encourage you to change your perspective on meditation. Change your perspective to, I get to meditate. Let me ask you this. Is there anything else that you can do in life where you do absolutely nothing yet gain so many benefits from it? I personally cannot think of a single other thing where all I have to do is literally sit and do nothing and get all of these wonderful benefits of meditation. Everything else requires effort and energy. So that is how I've kind of changed my perspective about this. It's not a chore. It's something I get to do. I get to do nothing. I get to relax. I get to sit down for 10 minutes and do absolutely nothing at all as my brain is growing, as my corpus callosum is getting stronger and bigger, as I'm developing my psychic abilities and my intuition. And it takes nothing. It takes sitting there and becoming a silent observer of your thoughts. It is the most low effort thing that you could possibly do with some of the greatest benefits. And lastly in this category, I just want to encourage you, practice, practice, practice. If something doesn't work, if you don't like a certain style of meditation, try a different style of meditation. Do not give up. This is such an integral part to a spiritual practice and it can help you in so many areas. I ultimately cannot teach resilience. That is one thing I wish I could teach, but I can't. So this is an opportunity for you to prove to yourself how resilient you are and how dedicated you are to bettering yourself and taking care of yourself and becoming a more holistic person. Don't give up on yourself. Do this for you. Don't do this for anybody else. Do this for you. You deserve all of these wonderful benefits that you are going to get with your meditation practice. So under that other video that I had made, the Occultist Guide to Brainwave States, I had asked you all to put your questions in the comment box underneath that video, and then I was going to go through and use those questions to kind of structure this video. So I've already answered some of the questions throughout various points of this video, but I wanted to take this next section and call it Q&A and answer some additional questions that I don't think I got to fully in these other categories. So let's go through some of these questions. I struggle with deep meditative states as I often get sudden and scary images that startle and bring me back to a flight mode. I think it's the consequence of my panic attacks and inability to lose control. I always fear that if I go deep into a meditation, something will happen in the physical plane. Any advice for this? So for people that do struggle with panic attacks or anxiety in general, this is a pretty common thing, this inability to lose control. So that is something that you're going to have to work with, the ability to just let go and observe these thoughts and know that you are safe regardless. That is so much harder said than actually done. If you can get yourself to recognize that these are just thoughts passing through and that you are simply a silent observer, you are allowing those thoughts to roll in and you're letting them roll back out and they have no further consequences other than just being random thoughts, you're obviously going to be much better off. People with anxiety or panic attacks may just have a harder time doing this. So the first thing that I would suggest is probably not what you want to hear, but I would definitely seek out some professional support for anxiety that is likely related to some sort of trauma, because there is going to be some sort of reason why you're clenching so hard and why you simply just can't let go. It sounds very much like a survival mechanism that you had to develop because of certain situations that may have potentially happened. And so that is the first thing, is that I would recommend some introspection, getting some some professional help to help with the anxiety and the panic attack part of it. With all that said, if that's something that you've already done, I would definitely recommend doing guided meditations from voices you trust. So there, you know how you get that intuitive feeling when you listen to someone's guided meditation and you're just like, ooh, I don't vibe with this person. I don't like the voice for some reason. Find a guided meditation that makes you feel incredibly safe. If there's someone's voice in particular that works, you can even do this for yourself. You can, if you don't really trust anyone else's voice, you can actually record your own voice reading some sort of guided meditation and then play it back for yourself so you can meditate. And what's great about these guided visualizations or guided meditations in general is that your hand is being held the entire way. Nothing scary is going to happen to you, and you know exactly where you're going because you've already listened to the whole meditation through, hopefully, and decided whether it's going to work for you. So you already know that you're going to a forest, or you already know that you're going to go lay on a beach with a little coconut drink or whatever it is. So I would recommend guided meditations for this specifically because you know what's going to happen, and then also potentially recording meditations in your own voice. There's actually something very self-soothing to listen to your own voice. I know a lot of people feel weird listening to themselves talk. That's a very common thing as well. But if you can move past that, it can be really comforting hearing your own voice because it is just you. You can feel safe. No one else is in your bubble. So I would recommend starting there. But ultimately, you will have to get yourself to a point where you are relinquishing control just a little bit and easing your mind in that these are just thoughts passing through. They do not mean that anything is going to manifest in the physical realm. In fact, I would be in so much trouble if 100% of my thoughts manifested in the physical realm. We would all be in so much trouble if that were the case. So just because you think something, it doesn't mean it's going to be manifested in your external environment. What is the difference between an astral meditation and everyday meditation? I don't usually use those terms specifically. Like, I don't say that I'm doing an everyday meditation today, but I think I understand what you mean by this question. So when you're going into the astral realm and you're doing some sort of astral work, that is where you have left the bounds of your own mind. And you are now beyond your body, beyond your mind, and into the astral realm. Whereas an everyday meditation, if we want to call it that, you are still within the bounds of your own mind. Even when you're doing visualizations, you're still in your own mind. You're really integrating mind, body, and spirit in those moments. And if you want more information on astral work specifically, definitely check out that video that I've already linked below where Bente and I talked about astral work and spirit flight. What are your thoughts on subliminal messaging and binaural beats? And then there was a couple questions like this. So a second follow-up question is it better to learn without these first, or will I become too dependent on them? So I just first want to say subliminal messaging and binaural beats, I think they're both fantastic for very different reasons. Subliminal messaging is great for brainwashing yourself. And I know that sounds really scary because brainwashing usually has a negative connotation, but subliminal messaging is such a great way to implant intentions into your subconscious mind. That is something that I actually utilize a lot in my practice. I will record my own voice saying things over and over and over again, and then I will play it back to myself, listen to it as I fall asleep, and utilize those subliminal messages to really implant intentions so I can manifest what it is that I want. So subliminal messaging can be really, really powerful. I think binaural beats is also something that's really fun to play around with. There are certain frequencies that are said to have certain effects on your body. I really love Meditative Mind on YouTube. That's the YouTube channel name. I'll link them in the description too, but they have lots of different binaural beats that I like to put on just while I'm studying, while I'm cleaning the house. You know, it doesn't have to be while I'm sitting down and doing a meditation, but I love binaural beats. Definitely check those out. As far as will I become too dependent on them, again, this is going to be totally personal to the individual. I don't think there's anything wrong with starting out just working with binaural beats. If that's what helps you get into an altered state of consciousness, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's really anything addictive about those things to where if you started with binaural beats, now you can't really meditate any other way because you become too dependent on them. I don't really think that's a risk and a problem. But again, everybody's different. You know, maybe there is a person out there that starts with binaural beats and then that's really the only thing they can practice with, in which case, is it that big of a deal if that's the only way that they can practice meditation? Because they're still meditating, right? At the end of the day, they've found a type of meditation that actually works for them. So who cares, you know? But I don't think you should worry too much about becoming too dependent on them. How do we ensure a safe and peaceful landing after an altered state of consciousness is reached? Okay, so there's a couple things that you can do to make sure you have a safe and peaceful landing when you're coming back out of a meditation. The first thing that I typically do is when I have my eyes closed still and I'm coming out of a meditation, I focus on my body first. I start to become in tune with myself again in the physical plane. So before you even open your eyes, you want to bring yourself, your awareness back to your body. And you want to say, okay, I feel my feet again. I feel my knees, my hips, my shoulders, etc. I can feel the clothes on my body. I can feel the meditation cushion I'm sitting on. And then start working outwards from your body and becoming aware of your environment. Start hearing the cars outside your window, or, you know, your partner in the kitchen, whatever it is. Just becoming aware of those external sounds again, so that you are not only becoming more aware of your body again and immersing yourself in the physical world, you're becoming aware of your environment. And this is all before you even open your eyes. You're taking a moment to really sit with yourself and reconnect yourself to the material world. And then you can slowly open your eyes and sit there for a moment. I definitely don't recommend just like jumping up and immediately going into the next thing that you have to do for the day. Definitely take a moment after meditation to rest and just slowly come back to your senses. I would also recommend, if you're using a timer of some sort, you know, some people will set a timer for 20 minutes. You definitely want the sound of that timer to be something that's peaceful and not jarring, because it is absolutely the worst thing in the world. This is why I don't use timers at all in my meditation practice. I don't ever use timers. But if you do, you want to make sure it's something that is nice. So when you're hitting that point of it being 20 minutes into your meditation, you're not all of a sudden shook and brought out of that because of this blaring beeping sound saying that 20 minutes has passed. So pick something that maybe gradually increases in volume, or maybe something that just beeps quietly for a little bit and then automatically shuts off, so that you don't even have to get up to turn it off, and you can allow yourself the extra couple minutes of becoming aware of your body and the external environment again. Another thing that I would suggest is, if you were going on some sort of visualization, shamanic journey, astral work, etc., there's usually a process involved of wherever you exit, you want to enter again. So if you're leaving your mind and you're going to the astral realm, let's say you're visualizing yourself in a bush and you're walking through the bush, and then you see this little hole in the ground, and then you jump through the hole and now you're at a beach. Whenever you leave that beach, you want to make sure you're going back from the beach, up the little hole, into the bush, and then back into your mind. So wherever you go, leave a trail and come back the exact same way that you came. It's going to be a lot more peaceful and integrated experience for you. So definitely come back the way you went out. What are your favorite resources? Okay, so I already mentioned Meditative Mind on YouTube. I really love their binaural beats. As far as meditation apps go, Aura is my favorite meditation app, and then my second favorite is Headspace. So I definitely recommend you get some sort of meditation app. This video is not sponsored by Aura. I have worked with Aura in the past though, and I really love that company. So definitely get an app. If you are interested in, I know this video is on meditation, but for anybody that is more interested in Zen Buddhism, because that is something really near and dear to my heart, as a lot of you know, I would recommend looking up an author, Thich Nhat Hanh. He is my favorite Zen Buddhist writer. I think he has at least one book specifically on meditation, but all of his other books are just so incredible for developing a mindfulness practice in general. So definitely go check out Thich Nhat Hanh. I would also recommend a book called Psychic Witch by Matt Aron for witches specifically, and it really helps you get in tune with your own energy. I really love the Psychic Witch book. It is heavy with visualizations though. So I have heard for a lot of people with aphantasia that they didn't necessarily love it because it just didn't work for them. But if you're somebody that can visualize and doesn't mind a lot of visualization exercises, that Psychic Witch book is fantastic. I love it. There are so many exercises in it, so many exercises for someone to do, and that would really help you develop a really strong, not only meditative practice, but also increasing your psychic abilities, your intuition, your ability to work with your own energy, like to draw upon and direct your own energy. So I think that Psychic Witch book is really important for witches. What is the next question? How to stay in theta without falling asleep. So I kind of mentioned this already, that if you want to get to theta and not fall asleep, I definitely recommend practicing in the morning rather rather than in the evening after you've already showered. I would recommend changing up your position, making sure that you're not too comfortable, of course, and then practicing lucid dreaming can also strengthen your ability to stay in theta for a lot longer. I do have a video on lucid dreaming. I'll link that too for you. I feel like it takes me 30 minutes to enter alpha. Is there a faster way to access alpha? Yes. So as I mentioned earlier in this video, this is where meditation triggers come in handy, where you are developing a certain posture of your hands or your body, and this trigger helps you get into that altered state of consciousness a lot faster. So it's not taking you 30 minutes to get into alpha. It can take you 5 minutes, and then you can sit down and pull some tarot cards. Any tips for a full-time caregiver that wants to meditate but also needs to be aware of their patient or partner's needs? So of course, I've got to cover the obvious. You want to make sure that you're looking for small opportunities in your day where you can take advantage of this and do meditative tasks. Again, it doesn't have to be you sitting there in silence. It can be while you're folding laundry, you know, doing something really, really monotonous and redundant to where you can allow yourself to slip into a trance-like state. Even if you're only meditating for a few minutes of time during the day, that's still way better than nothing. Also, just practicing mindfulness in general is really going to help you enter altered states of consciousness when you're ready to do that, when you're ready to sit down and do a ritual or a spell later on. So while you're taking care of your patient or your partner or whomever it is, really being mindful in that moment of your physical senses and being with them. So when you are touching their hand, you are focusing on the touch, the texture of their hand on your hand. You are focusing on your breath, or maybe listening to the sound of their voice and becoming really mindful of what that sounds like. But I also want to say that I feel like caregivers don't really prioritize their well-being a lot of the times because they're so used to taking care of someone else and needing to be on call that their own needs get neglected. So I'm sure you already know this, but I just want to say that you do deserve to be prioritized, and your well-being also matters. We are unable to take care of other people when we are not taking care of ourselves. So taking a couple minutes out of each day, however your schedule allows that, it's so important for you to be operating from your best place as well. How do you personally meditate? I mainly only do unguided visualizations because when I lay down to do a meditation, I am ready to go on a long journey. I'm ready to go on an astral journey, do some cool stuff. But my process, sometimes I'll drink a tea, sometimes I won't. I do like mugwort tea for this, but I also like valerian root. So sometimes I'll drink a little tea to get myself in the mood, or maybe I'll spritz something around my space that has some lavender and chamomile in it or something. I do have a lot of ritual oils. So I have some ritual oils that have specifically been crafted for psychic sight or enhancing psychic abilities. I will take some of that oil and anoint my forehead. Sometimes I'll anoint my chest as well so I can just smell it better during the meditation, but I really try to anoint the third eye area if I'm gonna go on long journeys. But that's mainly what I do now, is unguided visualizations, because usually when I'm sitting down to meditate, I'm wanting to gain guidance or messages from spirit or whatever sort of spiritual entities I'm working with at the time. So that's what I'm currently doing, although I'm sure that will change at some point. What is trance or a trance state? So trance is basically, the word trance can be defined a lot of different ways, but it basically just means an altered state of consciousness of any kind. A trance-like state can be something when you're slipping from, when we talked about in that brainwave states video, when you're slipping from beta to alpha, you are entering a trance-like state. Or even when you're going from alpha to theta or beta to theta, anything in the alpha to theta realm is usually considered a trance state. So it's basically just a form of altered state of consciousness where you feel like you're in a little bit of a trance and you're not consciously, like fully consciously, rationally aware of everything that's going on in your external environment. How do you perform complex rituals without slipping from alpha back to beta? This is a question I've gotten a lot, because when we're sitting down to do occult rituals, right, it's really difficult, especially when you have to move around and you may have to recite passages, you're pulling tarot cards, you're lighting incense or candles, whatever it is that you're doing. It's very easy to slip back from alpha back to beta, and that's not necessarily what you want to be. So this is why, if you're going to do a longer ritual, I recommend doing it a few times so that you just have the muscle memory down and it's like second nature. You want to get to a point where everything you're doing is just on autopilot. If there are any incantations that I'm doing during an occult ritual, I memorize those beforehand. I know not everybody's going to agree with me because they feel like that's way too much work, but for me, it makes my experience so much more intense and profound if I just have all of that stuff memorized. energized. And then when I go into a trance-like state, I can do the entire ritual without slipping from alpha to beta because it's like second nature. I'm on autopilot. I can just chant those things without having to read from a book and think about it. Some people like reading from a book, and that's fine. But in my experience, memorizing those things and doing like a couple practice rounds, if that makes sense, makes it a lot easier. But there are alternatives to where you're doing a ritual where part of the ritual is when you're in an alpha brainwave state, and then part of the ritual is when you're back to beta. So let's say you are sitting down to do tarot cards. Maybe as you're pulling the tarot cards, you're in an alpha brainwave state, and then when you're actually sitting down to analyze the cards that you've pulled, maybe you go back to a beta brainwave state, in which case that's totally fine. So you don't necessarily have to do the entire ritual while you're in alpha or theta. You can bounce back to beta at various points when you need your more conscious, rational mind present. Some people would totally disagree with that though and say that you need to be in alpha the entire time, especially when pulling tarot cards, like the example that we're using here, because when you're in that alpha brainwave state, you're able to receive divine messages from spirits or from some sort of higher power or whatever it is that you believe in while you're interpreting those cards. And you're missing out on all of that divine inspiration if you're back in a beta brainwave state, just consciously, rationally looking at the tarot cards. Because for some people, it's not just about the cards, it's about the intuitive messages they get while dealing with those cards. So it's really up to you. You can kind of play around with that, but again, maybe do a practice round, memorize things, or maybe find specific points of your ritual where it's okay for you to be in beta because you're not necessarily needing to draw upon any sort of energy or gain insight in that moment. Is it better to meditate in silence? Totally up to you. It is totally up to you. I would say if you're a beginner, it is a lot easier to meditate in silence. It is so much easier when you don't have a bunch of sounds in your external environment. But again, as we've talked about many times, everyone's different. Some people need background noise while they're meditating. So totally up to you, doesn't matter either way. If you have a strong conscious mind that filters out paranormal, or if you have blockages to your psychic abilities, are there any specific steps to take to resolve this, or is meditation the only thing? Meditation definitely helps with this, but breaking down those conscious barriers that you have also helps with this. So no, meditation is not the only way to go about this. This honestly deserves to be a video in itself for this specific question, because you're really going to want to dig into your own belief systems and really figure out why you feel this way. What is the root cause? Where do these feelings come from? So it takes a lot of journaling, a lot of introspection, a lot of going back to experiences in your childhood to figure out where those critical thoughts developed. Maybe there was someone in your life that really kind of pushed those thoughts into your mind, you know, shoved it down your throat and said that spirits aren't real, you aren't psychic, this is all kids play, stop being a kid, grow up, don't be a kid. You know, that kind of feedback from the adults in our lives can really change the way we critically think forever. We grow up thinking, okay, I can't be a child, this is childish and this is fantasy, I'm not psychic, spirits don't exist, etc., etc. So there's a lot of introspection that has to happen here to break down those barriers. And my question for you would be, what would it look like if you lifted all of those conscious barriers? What would it look like if just for one brief moment you allowed yourself to open up and to say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. What if spirits are real? What if psychic abilities are real? I wonder what that would look like. And maybe you can do a journaling exercise where you write out literally what your world would look like if you allowed yourself to really fully tap into your psychic abilities and believe in what it is that you're doing. So again, this is a very complex issue, and this honestly deserves to be its own topic, but I hope that gives you at least a starting place. What if you meditate daily and can at least reach alpha, but still cannot get past this threshold? So I would say switch up your technique here. I really like mantra meditation, or that transcendental meditation we were talking about. If you are unable to hit the next point where you're not able to go past alpha and really go deeper, you got to switch it up and try a different technique. So definitely look into mantra meditations if that's something you're interested in. Try some body scans if you haven't done that before, some different type of breath work. You'll have to play around and really experiment to see what works for your own mind and your own brain wiring. What has been your experience with meditating on your own versus guided? So guided meditations are fantastic, especially if you tend to be a little bit more of an anxious person. It's just good to know where you're going, and it's good to know that you're in safe hands. But it does become limiting because someone else is taking you on a journey, and that really stifles your own creativity to get messages from the divine. So at a certain point, once you already know how to do a visualization and how to meditate, I don't personally do guided visualizations at all anymore, unless somebody's like a friend is offering or something, then I'll do one. But I mainly do completely unguided visualizations meditations because I want the pure freedom of being able to go wherever I want and to receive whatever messages I'm meant to receive in that moment. So I do find guided meditations for me personally are a little bit limiting, but they were so helpful in the beginning of my practice, just trying to learn how meditation works in the first place, because there's no way I would have been able to take myself on an astral journey without going through all those guided meditations, because I wouldn't know where to begin. I wouldn't know what to do or where to go. So it took listening to all of those guided meditations in order for me to be able to get to the point where I could write my own meditations. So pros and cons to both for sure. Last question here is, which brainwave state is best for setting intentions and manifesting? Alpha. Alpha is that brainwave state that you want for manifestation, setting intentions, doing occult rituals that still require you to move your body, etc. You can also utilize subliminal messaging as you're falling asleep at night and entering a theta brainwave state and implant your intentions there too. So I would mainly say alpha is best for this, but there are some cases where intention setting and manifesting can be done in theta. I just think that alpha is best for active manifestations, if that makes sense, that don't require you to do like lucid dreaming or something like that. Again, it just depends on the person. So I hope that I answered everyone's questions. I tried my best to tackle. I know that there was a couple that I probably didn't get to, but I at least got to all the questions that had been asked multiple times by many people. So I hope this meditation guide is really, really helpful for you. I'm putting a ton of effort and energy into this video, so I want this to be a really, really good source for you. If you liked this video and learned something, please consider becoming one of my channel members. There are a ton of perks for channel members. There is also a tip jar on every single one of my videos. It really helps keep this channel up and running so I can continue providing free education for everyone. But if you do have the means and if you are interested, there is a tip jar down below. It's called a super thanks, and you can leave a little tip in there. It all goes to me and not YouTube, which is fantastic because YouTube takes a large cut from YouTubers. So the super thanks is a way to just tip the content creator directly without YouTube interference, which is really nice. I just want to thank you all so much for your support on this channel. It means the world to me. All the funds raised from this YouTube channel go straight towards my college tuition, so I appreciate you all supporting me in that way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in another video soon.